Welcome, everyone, and thank you for coming on such a cold night. I think we're going to warm it up. My name is David Scobie. I'm the Dean of the New School for Public Engagement, one of the 7 divisions of the New School, and it's a great pleasure to welcome you to this Engaged Lives conversation with Stephan Said. The New School for Public Engagement, our division, is committed to the idea of learning in action, of an education that puts learning into action and enables our students to learn through action. We've got programs we've got an undergraduate program for adult non-traditional undergraduates and master's programs in fields like international affairs, urban policy, but also media studies and creative writing. And in all of that, we're committed to an education that overcomes the distinctions between theory and practice, between the campus and the world, that engages teaching and learning in solving public problems and making public culture. And this Engaged Lives conversation series is a series of discussions that brings graduates of these programs back to the New School to talk about their lives, their work, the difference that the New School has made to their lives and their work. We've had an extraordinary, fascinating set of alums of different generations from different parts of our division come back this year. But I'd say that none of them more exemplifies the values of our university and division and the spirit of these discussions than Stephan Said. Stephan's a graduate of our adult non-traditional undergraduate program and of our graduate program in international affairs. He's had a long career as both a musician and a social activist before and during and after his time at the New School. He's cut several albums that mix, to my ear, folk, punk, Appalachian, Arabic, and many other musics. He's multi-musical, he's multicultural in his own background, and he's a great boundary crosser and unifier in his own politics. I don't want to give too much away about either his musics or his social activism. That's the heart of this conversation. But I will say that Stephan is just at the launch of a new musical and social change project that I know we're going to talk about, and I want to kind of give you a teaser about this, the vision of a Light the World tour that connects social change activists in different communities, in different nations, on different campuses all over the world. And I mention that because I know that we're interested in being a part of that project, and maybe Stephan is interested in engaging folks at the New School in New York about it. So if you're interested, I hope you'll come up and speak with him and learn more about it, and we'll talk about ways that we can stay involved in his work. So here's the format of this Engaged Lives conversation. Stephan and I will talk for, 45 minutes or so, but we're going to start with a video clip of 1 or 2 songs that in a second I'll ask him to tee up for us. After our conversation, we'll have time for open question and answers and your own thoughts and responses. And I've also asked Stephan to play a couple of his own songs, and he's graciously agreed to do that at the end, maybe at other times. We'll see how the spirit moves us. After the conversation, everyone is invited to a reception that will be out the door and about 30 yards uptown across the street in the Welcome Center of the university, right across 13th Street. Please do come and stay and talk and be with us. And the only other little bit of business I'd ask is, if you do, as I hope, ask questions and make comments and join the conversation, come to us at the end and sign a permission form so that we can broadcast the whole range of this on YouTube and in other places. No, definitely questions and comments. So, Stephan, do you want to give just a little intro to the clips that we're going to see?
I guess we should only do one. I mean, if you want to just play that one, I don't think it needs I mean, I can tell you that this. Can y'all hear me? I have a pretty strong voice, so I usually tempted to not use the microphone. But this past, just recently, this past year, I went to Iraq. I got funding for a vision of mine to kind of create a "We Are the World" sort of song for the global generation. But I thought if it was going to happen, if such a thing would happen, particularly in this interconnected era, that it should rise up from people who, from ground zero, not be delivered to them, right? And then spread and bridge cultures. And so that's, I was very fortunate to be supported to be able to go and do it and to cut the song to do it with, and it was just the beginning of it. It's still actually just the beginning. I went there in April. It was the first, I was there for the week in which the violence, which has continued to this day, actually went through the roof. The week I was there was the most violent week since 2008. And the footage that you see is all shot in one day. And there was actually like a flash mob using the type of technology that we used in Seattle and then in Egypt and Tunisia and everywhere thereafter in organizing. It was literally organized in 4 days' time. I flew into Baghdad. The whole crew met me at the Palestine Hotel. Within 4 days, we were in Zawra Park on Good Friday, and hundreds of people joined in while, you wouldn't know it, but 4 bombs are going off across the city. So it's, since we've been back, like actually it's just getting ready to launch, but I'll just finish describing it. I just started writing the outreach letters, and Pete Seeger was one of the first people to then make a sign like all the people in the video saying, hold with me and a little kid saying the name of the song. So the idea now is that we'll have people from all over the world doing the same thing and then connecting them on an online platform and then touring to them to build nodes for social change everywhere we go. Make sense? Anyway, so you can see it.
Just dragging my feet, couldn't find my beat. I was staring at the ground till the light came down and filled my soul with love, just like nectar dripping from above. I swear in my heart, no, it's true. That's why I'm standing here in front of you. Love took away my fears, picked me up and brought me here. Love, make the world go round, fill it with your sound, rising up from every nation and town, down from the sky, up from the ground, coming like the world. Love, make it go around.
So I want to. This is where we're going to end. In Baghdad, in Iraq, with the music that's part of a global peace project. But I'd actually like to flash back before we talk about this and think kind of what was your journey that leads up to here. So just start by talking a little bit about your upbringing, your family, where you found yourself in your music, like the young woman in that video.
Well, I grew up in a musical family. I was lucky in that way. My mother is Viennese, and she played piano, and we didn't really have any choice. We didn't have a choice. We didn't really have any choices. Inaccurate. We did not have a choice. We had to choose an instrument at a young age and decide which one it would be. And I was lucky because I was the youngest, so I had all my siblings already playing piano, trombone, cello, clarinet, and so I got to play all of their instruments before I even chose one. When I was 2, 3 years old, 3, 4 years old, I'd already played a wide variety of instruments by ear. And then when I was 4 years old, my mother asked me to choose which instrument I would play, and I already knew I wanted to play violin because I was in love with Dvorak's Fifth Symphony, the Symphony from the New World, right? And that made me just want to play the violin, and so that was it. She took me into a room, and it's a really pretty cool story. When I was 4 years old, she took me in a room. She laid out a whole bunch of different instruments on the floor, of every different kind: reed instrument, brass instrument, string instrument, and she said, "Well, what is it?" And I already knew where the violin was, and I just went straight for it. That was what I wanted to play. But I grew up playing, and it was always there. Classical music, and folk music, and Appalachian bluegrass music, blues and stuff, because I grew up in Appalachia. And then after we moved to Richmond, Virginia, the older I got, I really seized on that. I hoboed and migrant farm worked, and that's a whole other story maybe we'll get into some, but divorced myself at some point from pop culture later on, and just to immerse myself in oral traditions. So maybe we should get there more.
Now, I hear, you said you play classical music, but I hear a lot of fiddling, and I hear the Appalachian music in that song as well as the Arabic music. How did you explore all those musics and combine them together?
I think that, well, one, by playing them. It's, playing fiddle conventions from a young age, and also having, Kulthum and in the house. It helps, because you're playing along with it, or you're hearing it, and it's no different than any language. I think, you have to develop a skill, obviously, and even somebody that listens to Arabic music all their life or Appalachian music doesn't mean they're going to be able to play it. So you have to develop it, but at the same time, your ear hears it, at least as an improviser. When I write melodies, I can't take the history of music that has made me out of me. So it influences the way I hear and the melodies that I play, and it twists them, and So I think that's mostly it. It becomes embedded in your identity.
Your mother was Viennese. Your father was Iraqi.
Iraqi, yeah. So my father's actually, in some ways, maybe the more natural musician. It's hard to tell. But growing up in Iraq, he didn't have that opportunity, right? He didn't have the opportunity to be a musician. It wasn't something that it wasn't an option. Although he's highly musical, constantly singing, always drumming.
And one knows your story, and you look at this, and it's a story, of equal parts music and social change and activism. Did that politics come from your family too?
Yeah, my mother and my father divorced though when I was 2, so I wasn't raised by my real father, and I didn't have his influence as much as I wished. I think anybody that's a child of divorce feels that way. But I love my father, my stepfather, very much, and he was unbelievably. If it wasn't enough to have the Arabic and Austrian and Muslim and Christian, and then some Holocaust victims in my family in Vienna. You know, I had it all. I had all sides of what is today the biggest conflict in the world, right? In our house. So that was personally for me. All the violence we even see today around us is it's my own identity. I mean, it's not just Israel and Palestine and Iraq and the U.S. You know, it's actually also every bit is actually my family and my blood fighting each other, and that has been the biggest driving force, is just having it without a choice, having it internalized. And then but my mother was always she was an activist. You know, she was a women's rights activist. I grew up editing the ERA newsletter for Virginia, and you know, the Abortion Rights League pamphlet. My mother was the head of the Abortion Rights League for the state of Virginia, which is one of the more conservative, you know, states in the country. And you know, being a Virginian, now you're going to hear my accent starting to come out, but it's an interesting place to grow up in that way, because you end up having to put everything, all of your politics, in such a way that they can actually bridge, right? That happens in a place like Virginia. You know, so that became internalized. And my Jesuit father, my stepfather, was a Jesuit that left the order to be with my mother, and he was a hardcore. I mean, the whole Jesuit philosophy for hundreds and hundreds of years is not so much Bible-y. It's much more about social activism and rigorous intellectual critical theory. So that was the biggest thing.
It's an amazing, I mean, your family history is extraordinary. Say a little bit more, if you don't mind, about what you just meant about having to learn to cross borders in your politics by living in Virginia.
Yeah, I mean, I don't mean to make it something exclusively about Virginia, because you find this all around the world. I do think it has everything to do with actually the conversation about the history of oral tradition and music throughout the world, whether you're from Ghana, you know, or from Europe, or from, right? The music has played a huge role in maintaining in oral tradition, folk tradition, blues, all these kinds of things, maintaining messages in such a way that they can be transmitted across. This is what we're living in, a generation that's largely lost touch with that because of the commercialization of culture, right? But this is a much more than just about Virginia. But you do find it in a place like Virginia, because it is, one, it's old, it's southern, predominantly agrarian, still, you know, society that up until this century. And so you still have that rich culture, and you know, I mean, I don't want to open up tons of cans of worms. I mean, Richmond was you know, the capital of the South, and it's 60% African American, right? I mean, you know, I grew up with it. My best friend, Alja Evans, was black, and we learned and all the piano tunes and pop songs on the radio when we were 8, 9 years old together. We competed. We'd be like, oh, did you hear the new song? Oh, I got it. And Alja and I would be like doing this. And the first time I got my ass kicked, excuse my French, was because a couple other friends of mine found out that my friend was African American. They're like, what you doing hanging out with that guy? And then found me in my backyard coming home from school one time. I was 11 years old, and I refused to fight them. And you know, they held me down and kicked me in the face, and you know what I mean? But at the same time, you find the kind of living together that you don't find in the North, because they've been living together. They've been living together, so you have both sides in that dichotomy. So it teaches people to speak a language that's you know, the Jeffersonian eidolon of American politics, of that whole vision. It's very strong in a place like Virginia.
You've talked a lot about the kind of organic relationship to oral traditions and folk traditions and different musics, and again, I can kind of hear that in the song. But I also know from our conversations that if I heard you play when you were age 17 or 18, it wouldn't have been folk music and Appalachia, at least not on the surface. You were touring with a punk band and really trying to break into that world of a certain kind of commercial music, weren't you?
I wouldn't say commercial. It was actually very anti-commercial. Before the grunge major label deal, it was stridently anti that, right? I mean, most people know, like hip hop and in the late '80s, hip hop and punk were simultaneously stridently anti-establishment, and had built the whole movements were built as alternative culture. And that was the purpose of it. So, obviously when, Nirvana, that whole thing. I mean, I quit high school, just so you know, and those things were happening. I just hadn't figured, they hadn't gelled so I could be all of those parts of myself at once. I was going in the summertime when I still could and playing fiddle conventions. I was playing in a jazz quintet with Ellis Marsalis, Wynton's dad, and then I was, then I went on tour with a punk rock band. So I hadn't quite, while I was studying politics and writing about, they hadn't congealed to where, I can do all this in my own music in the same whole vision that I want. It took another 1 or 2 years from when I quit high school when I was 17. Probably 19, 20, I starting to write my own, modern broadsides, I would say.
One of the things I love about these conversations is that it makes, when we tell our story now from where it happened, especially when it's a story of kind of creative achievement, everything sounds as if it was foreordained. Everything just, naturally led up to this amazing moment. Actually, when you live it, it's full of twists and turns and false starts and failures and retries. So if we had the 20-year-old, I guess that would have been Stephan Smith at that point.
Yeah, even, I used Said some, and I used my stepfather's name, Gutowski, that was the Jesuit, but
if we had...
When I was that old, what was I? Picture me with my, with like a mohawk in a van with a bunch of punks on SST doing shows with Sonic Youth, and, and I was the youngest one in the scene. Right, I was the kid. They were all 10 years older than I was, and I was having a meltdown because it was cool, but I was just like, I was already jonesing. I was very tweaked. I was a little bit of, I think, the next generation, and I don't know. I don't know where it came from, but I was definitely preoccupied by what seemed to be an imminent collapse or catastrophe coming to the world, like a crisis. And I don't think I was alone. I think our generation kind of had been knowing and waiting, and it was common sense, It was like, population can't go but so long, we can't use the resources but so long, blah, 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 and we're hitting that time now. And I just, those rough moments, I've had a number of them, and one of the first ones I remember was coming back across the country after my first nationwide tour and doing those shows. And we just played, I think it was either with Sonic Youth or Meat Puppets in Tulsa, Oklahoma. And and we were heading back east, and we were going by all this farmland, and I was, and I was seeing all these beautiful farms and all these good people who I knew were Christians and voted Republican and believed every bit as much as I did that people needed to live equally because that was Christ's vision of living equally. And these are people who are not making a lot of money and who knew that if we didn't start doing unto others, just as well as my Marxist, whatever, anarchist, critical theory activist, they also knew. And I was like, we need to be uniting if we're going to fix this problem because the problem is that bad. It's way worse than pointing fingers and being angry. And I had a very discomforting realization that the loud music that was turning off these people and sounded like noise to them was just not what I wanted to do. I wanted to be reaching these people. I didn't want to be alienating people. And that's what forced me. That's when after that tour, I put down my instruments and I went migrant farm working across Europe, and sent myself into oral tradition, searching for, very deliberately, something that I thought that modern culture had lost in the commercialization of music, commercialization of pretty much all the tools that humanity had had for thousands of years.
Is it too simple to say, I mean, I'm sure it is, but to say that you put down your punk and you took up your folk?
No, because I hadn't taken, I mean, I was still very heavy into all kinds of music, and I was still playing punk. I was developing what I wanted to do. I was too young. I didn't have my own sound yet. So I wasn't there yet. I never put down, anything, but it was more a question of figuring out how would I use it, right? It's a tool bag. But that was a moment, and I hadn't figured it out yet.
It was a musical and a political meltdown all at the same time.
Yeah, meltdown or door opening, and I don't know where in that point in time. Somewhere in all of that, either via teachers and reading or, artists, I had gotten turned on to the whole intellectual tradition of mnemonic art. So memory theater, Giordano Bruno, Rosicrucianism, and all that type of a thought, which deals with deals with just, even studying Cicero and orations or oratory skills, getting into the way that the mind catalogs and can hold vast amounts of information. So because I knew that was part of what was missing, although somehow I'd gotten turned on to it, and so that was a part of it. That was like, okay, well, I'm going to give up commercial culture. I'm not going to communicate much. I'm going to go migrant farm work, and I'm going to work in the fields, and that's going to be my life.
So where the new school professor in me now is being a little selfish.
Oops.
Where did your turn to New York and you're ending up here? How did that grow out of those changes and develop?
It grew up pretty directly. I mean, after I migrant farm worked across Europe, I came back to the States, and pretty quickly was in a well-known band in the Southeast called the Ululating Mummies, which is like a world beat band. So we were playing Sufi music, playing Rai music, every all in one set. A Macedonian tune, a Bulgarian dance song, an Appalachian song. It was awesome. The band was off the hook, and then still sort of figuring it out, but getting to the brink. And then what happened around that time, as you might remember, this is like '92. We bomb Iraq, and I just was sort of maturing to my voice, to know that, and that was a catalyst. That was like, my family was getting bombed. I knew that the reason we were going there wasn't what it was all about. I knew that it was the first war of globalization. I knew it was really about the fact that capitalism itself, communism had already not worked, and capitalism was now showing that it could not work either, and that we needed something next, but that it was in its last gasp, right? Going to Iraq it was obvious to me that this was not about just an anti-war movement, that this was about the inability of the market to expand anymore without deliberately controlling people. The only way they could continue the markets continue to expand in order to maintain the profits necessary to maintain the entire system was to clamp down on resources. And that's what's going on. It's what's going on now. And it was obvious. And that's why, to me, I was like, there's no way to save my family from getting bombed except for to try to create that movement that Christ talked about, that Muhammad talked about, that MLK talked about, and we still haven't achieved. Except right now, that's where it came from. And in that point in time, I lucked out and met Allen Ginsberg out at the Naropa Institute, where somebody invited me to come out there, and like the day I arrived, I did he'd heard about me as some young folk prodigy, and I sang at the dedication the day I arrived. It was just one of those things, talk about accidents. There was an ethnomusicologist, an artist, and filmmaker, eccentric, named Harry Smith, that some of y'all might know who he was. you should know who he was. He's a brilliant guy. He produced, among not just some groundbreaking films and techniques in film that were used by lots of but he produced the American Anthology of Folk Music, inarguably the most influential record that to the entire folk movement and arguably the political rock music of the 60s as a result, right? And he did so, and this is an interesting tie-in because Harry was a hardcore up on mnemonic art, the history of what I was talking about, Giordano Bruno, Rosicrucianism, kind of Akashic record, if you're familiar with this type of studying of cosmic connections between things and bringing them together to create this sequence of songs. It was the sequencing that he did that was brilliant. In any case, I'm rambling, but Harry had just died. I didn't even know who he was. I didn't know who he was at the time. I learned afterwards. And I didn't even know of this anthology of American folk music yet. I had actually just been raised with all these songs and learned them word of mouth from old farmers in the South, right? I didn't learn them from records like Dylan and Springsteen. People, like most of them, learned this stuff from records. I learned it word of mouth. And Alan's like, will you sing some songs from West Virginia, North Carolina, whatever, for the dedication of Harry's old house where we're going to put this printing press? And okay, so I sang like 5 songs, standing on the tap, banjo, fiddle, whatever. Finally find out that 3 of them were on this. Oh, you know that? People were like, you know that from this record? That's what Harry produced. And I was like, I didn't even know the record existed. And then shortly after that, that was an amazing time because like I was only there for 3 days. Miles Davis had also just died, and Amiri Baraka was there, and he had just penned this ode to Miles and asked me to join him in his performance of it. So I played violin into So What, right? While Amiri was doing was reading the poem, and it was a powerful performance. And it was just one of those things. David Crosby was there from Crosby, Stills and Nash, and Hal Wilner, a producer, a music producer that I've now done albums with, but who, produced Sun Ra and you name it, and has been the music producer at SNL for Saturday Night Live for a long time, was in the room, and I was there for 3 days and left there with a handful of people, Alan, and people saying, you should come to New York. And with my angst having had the Iraq War just happened, or recently before, this is like 95, I was like, okay, it's time to go and try to do your deal. So that's what brought me to New York.
That's the combination of these world events and then these just amazing accidents all being brought to bear on turning your life around on a dime is really kind of amazing.
Oh, it is actually. I mean, I know it's true for all of us. It's funny because you're making me remember something. At that time, before I decided to come to New York, that moment, the thing that I was about to do, is I had told a couple of my friends, I didn't have a home, I was itinerant. And I told my friends, and I was mostly living in Appalachia at the time, but traveling constantly. And I told them that I was gonna, I was a motorhead, I fixed up all old cars, 64 Galaxy, 63 Comet, T-Bird, whatever. And I said, I'm giving all this junk up and I'm gonna walk. I'm gonna walk to New Orleans, down through the mountains. I'm leaving all modern culture behind me and I'm gonna go meet people face to face and write down, that's what I was gonna do. Until I went there and then I was like, no, I'm gonna move to New York. But I totally forgot that ridiculous plan. I mean, I can't imagine what had happened if I'd tried to do that.
So you come to New York.
Like, who do I think I was? I mean, what a ridiculous kid.
So New York in the 90s, and again, if this is too simplistic, you should correct it, but one way of understanding it is this was your effort to maybe try and do commercial music and be political at the same time, or
No.
Okay, do better than I just did.
Well, I mean, I don't, in some way it was, but I know that in retrospect, I mean, I know my first and foremost thing was that I somehow thought I wanted to write songs to change the world. That's what I wanted to do. And that's all I cared about. And I didn't really care about the music industry. I was like, the world's freaking hitting the fan. I want to somehow try to recreate something that doesn't exist. And I had set this ridiculous, whatever, goal for myself. I mean, I actually had told myself that I thought that like I set a bar for myself that if I could, I didn't want to sign a record deal because I thought that a real proof of a great song that could change the world would be that it would not even ever be recorded. This is already, you know, computers are there. But I was like, well, they don't even have to be recorded, much less turned into MP3s, which didn't exist yet. They would a few years later. But that was some of the perspective that I had. At the same time, no mistake, I'm not an idiot. I mean, I came to New York City. The first night I came here, I played at the Bottom Line, a big club with Alan and Jim Carroll, the late poet, Basketball Diaries. And, you know, the next night I was at a party after, you know, SNL party with Harvey Keitel and Madonna because I was this young whippersnapper. And so I wasn't ignorant about pop culture and, you know, I wasn't ignorant about it, but I just wanted to do it my own frickin' way. I was young and young enough to be stupid.
And did you do it that way? Do you feel like you wrote the songs you wanted to write and did it the way you wanted to?
I did in the end. I did. I mean, you know, Alan died shortly thereafter, and his death was sort of the almost a catalyst in a sense for when I actually broke. It was only a few months later. Shortly after Alan died, I mean, I've been playing regularly at this club Chenet that you guys might know about. It was a famous little club in the East Village on St. Mark's. And Chenet had become famous. I had started there, so me, a bunch of pretty good friends of mine, Jeff Buckley, David Poe, a whole bunch of artists were playing there at the time, and it was an amazing scene. And because I was also a fiddler, I played with lots of people, and I was also playing at the, you know, after everybody stopped playing, I would be playing the folk music with, you know, with Irish folk musicians and blah, blah, blah. So I was playing music 12, 14 hours a day at that point in time. And Alan died, and shortly after Alan died, this Haitian guy, Abner Louima, was brutalized. Famous, right? Famous incident. And at Alan's death, over Alan's death, we'd met before, but it was at Alan's death, I became close to Patti Smith, the singer. And Patti wanted to play music with me, so she kept inviting me over to the house right after Alan had died. And this was right when the Abner Louima thing happened. And Patti came home to her place one afternoon, and she was like, "You won't believe this. This Abner Louima guy, and I was just riding the train. I wanted to ride the train, and everybody was talking about it. The buzz was just like everybody was talking about it. She was just like intense about it. And we were playing this song, Little Sadie. It's an old folk tune that even the Grateful Dead did in a rock version, right? But I knew because at that point I'd already been so schooled by. I was lucky. I'd been around masters. I mean, being around Ginsberg and Peter Orlovsky and Gregory Corso and those people, man, I was given knowledge about long-term folk history like you don't get in books, and like my generation definitely doesn't get anymore. And but Little Sadie's really, if you there's the old tune that Leadbelly used to play, Turner and Brady, right? Anybody here know the tune? Turner, anyway, that's even an older interpolation of the same song that Little Sadie is. In any case, so I kept on playing it, and I left Patti's place and couldn't stop thinking about Louima, and did the studying on it, and couldn't get the melody out of my head, and wrote the song, and called Patti at midnight, and I was like, or something like, the next morning, I was like, I'm coming over, I want you to hear this song, I just wrote a song about this, blah, blah, blah. So I go over to Patti's house the next morning again. And it was like 4 or 5 days in a row where I think I was at Patti's house for about 10 or 12 hours a day. And we just kept playing and playing, and that was all it was. It was like, is it was just one of those weird things where it just seemed, it was just the energy. It wasn't, and she loved it, and started singing background vocals to it. And I called up a friend of mine at WNYC, and this is kind of hush, but it's not hush, but it's well known. And we went up after hours to, New York's NPR station and recorded the song with me playing guitar and singing the vocals and Patti singing background vocals. And it was late 1997, and most computers didn't have CD burners yet, but some of them did. Most people would have a CD burner that you'd hook up to your computer, right? And I didn't want to have a part of the, I was part of the broadside, political activist, get this thing out there, create change mindset. So I just, with a couple friends, I burned like 100 copies and got a list of radio stations from somebody, and it went out, and all of a sudden it was charting, and Howard Stern played it, spent the whole week talking about the song, goading people that he was going to play it and not played it. I'm going to play it, the whole week long, I'm going off and off, but it's just an interesting example of so that was kind of it. The next thing was, big half-page article in the New York Times, and Pete Seeger being interviewed about me, and at that point I kind of felt, well, wow, I was living in a squat. I had nothing. I was living in a squat on 7th Street between B and C, and being tracked by Giuliani. I mean, I remember there being a car full of police out in front of my, in an undercover car at that time, with frickin' it looked like one time I walked out right after I got in a car from Jesse Jackson or somebody about coming and being on the Montel Williams show, and I walked out of the squat, and I was a poor kid, man. I was 25, 6 or something like that, and and there was this undercover car with 5 goony-looking guys in it with some device pointed up to the window of my apartment. That was a trip.
So there's a lot of
anyway, I'm rambling.
But it's bringing out a lot of memories. Is that all right?
It's great. There's a lot of stories to tell, I know, from the music we recorded after, but I want to jump ahead to kind of post 9/11, and I wonder what that crisis and the Iraq War did to this mix of your musical ambitions and your political ambitions, and kind of how it points towards the work that you're doing now.
I would just say that it's a good time to even get more incisive. Just, around the 2000, the lead up to 9/11, I would say that, Seattle had happened. I'd released my first album after that to help organize the Seattle demonstrations. And at that point in time, I and I think a whole generation had realized that we had to take it to the streets. We had to make it as accessible as possible. We had to make the message as big as possible. And so I started opening up, wanting to make my music as far-reaching as I could, searching my soul in that way. And then after, when 9/11 happened, I wrote a song that became the first really big breakout anti-war hit, and Pete Seeger joined me on that, and members of a rock group, Ween, which I can't believe, I don't know who put that there, but that's like a Ween symbol, isn't it, kind of? I used to play in Ween in the 90s, in the beginning, in the late 90s, but isn't it? Looks pretty much like a logo for this band that I was in, but that was an amazing thing. I mean, it was, but at the same time, it was
For those who don't know it, what was the name of that?
It was called The Bell, and it was a modern version. It was done in the old folk tradition, in the sense that I had taken an ancient song, very ancient song, and rewritten it. It was an ancient song called "The False Night on the Road," which has its roots in Scandinavia, pre-Celtic invasion of the British Isles, even. It shows up in Scottish folk song, Irish folk song, right? But there are roots of it in Finland, and where you find the same tale being told even further back. So the song is about a young boy who meets this dark knight, which is supposedly like the devil, right, on his road to school. And the devil is trying to, this dark knight, obviously a military figure representing the devil, is confronting the child. Y'all into this? Hearing this? This is the full process right here. So the devil confronts the child and says, "Well, you know, where are you going?" And the child is brilliant enough to stop the evil, and outdoes him with every riddle, right? And I was like, this is I couldn't get the song out of my mind right after 9/11, and it was one of those things where a couple hours later the song was done. It was just, but then I chose to produce it with like a loop and loud guitars, but still using the old melody and the basis of it in the same way that maybe the first Dylan records, you would associate with doing the same type of rewriting, right? All those early songs, and Joan Baez, Bob Dylan, Blowing in the Wind, those are rewrites of old songs in the same way. Those are not wide open like random creations. Those are rewrites, as probably everybody here knows, but I just made it very modern. And but the interesting thing is that I was immediately blacklisted. I was in the New York Times again, NPR, everything like that. But the New York Times mentioned that I was Iraqi American, and nobody had made a single statement that it was against the war yet at all, that had broken into the mainstream. This is September 11th, 9th, when we released it. It was 9/11/2002. At that point in time, this is 6 months before the Iraq War starts, right? 5-6 months before the Dixie Chicks make their little quip that gets them in trouble. And that was the reason that we put this out. That was very much like using music to create a news story, to get a word out in public that was being censored by the news. And it worked. It worked because, one, nobody had done it. It worked because there was a great journalist named Neil Strauss at the New York Times, who was one of the music editors at the time, who doesn't write there anymore. And Neil was pissed off, I think, and wanted to say something. And it worked because when we released it, obviously on 9/11, you can imagine, 2002, all the newspapers were mega headlines, mastheads. The world mourns, the United States mourns and is preparing for war. It was a two-line sentence. U.S. mourns, prepares for, it was, there was the caption. It was like 1, 2, A leads to B. And at the same time, Paul McCartney and Springsteen were coming out with albums like The Rising that were at best innocuous. They were like, they were questionably supporting nationalism. And it was like, what is going on here? We'd already had in April, and I sang, and some of the footage for the Bell video was shot in April, was the first of 2011. There was, 2002 there was already the first really big anti-war demonstration in Washington D.C. at the Washington Monument. There was 150,000 people there. It was huge, and so I was there and sang at it. And we shot footage for it so that could be released intentionally on 9/11 to create that and produce the video between them. But it's just interesting because while it got all that publicity and helped, instantly I was untouchable. Even progressive artists their managers would not allow me to do shows with them. So here I'd gone from the year before opening up for Bob Dylan and Dave Matthews and all the next Woody Guthrie, Bob Dylan press about me, to being instantly untouchable because they were all afraid, bottom line, that they were going to lose CD sales if they had this Iraqi anti-war singer on stage with them. And what happened is I basically was facing, this is when my relationship with Pete became even deeper, because I was facing a blacklisting that I didn't have anybody else that I knew had been through something like this. And I couldn't even talk about it. Because in the music industry, even my close friends couldn't admit that what they knew was going on. You know what I mean? It's just too difficult of a reality. And anyway, the long thing is that only made me want to make more beautiful music, untouchable, unstoppably beautiful music so that it couldn't be stopped by anybody.
So two things, since I want to actually invite the audience into that. I want to invite people to ask Stephan if you're interested more about this, the kind of struggle around blacklisting and what happened towards the end of it. But I want to invite you, and you can absolutely say no to this if you want to play the bell on, live or another song. But I also want to make sure that you tell us a little bit about the Light the World tour and kind of come back to the moment.
Well,
and then let's open it up after that.
I mean, it segues well, and I'll try to be briefer about this than I have been. I've been taking liberty, but
this is great.
Well, you've been asking questions that have been making me think about things I haven't gone over. So, in any case, but all that led to, I'd known already that I always wanted to be with my generation and where social change was, and that's still where I will want to be until I'm dead. That's the way Ginsberg was, that's the way Pete was, and I felt like in my generation there weren't really examples like that. And I'm going to do that. I'm going to tell you right now, I'm going to be doing that until I know I will, because I can't help it. It's just the way I'm wired. And even if I'd have, whatever. But what happened from that is that leads to Light the World and the whole vision of it, and this is before Arab Spring and Occupy and all of that, was that because of the blacklisting, a friend of mine who'd been the head of educational programming for NYFA, New York Foundation for the Arts, wanted to get out of New York after 9/11 to raise children, right? And she was like, I can book with as many social change organizations or have posted your song on their website. I can book you a tour outside of the music industry. And sure enough, she was brilliant, and I was playing at I had 240 shows in 1 year. All with student groups, right? Social change organizations, churches, synagogues, whatever, progressive, you name it, all of them. It was awesome. And I was on the phone with Pete. I was like, Pete, you won't believe this. This is, because my only reference for that kind of touring was Highlander Institute, early days of SNCC, right? Building the civil rights movement. And for the type of touring that he and Leadbelly and Woody Guthrie did, so forth, to union halls. Pete was like, Stephan, there's lots has been said about that kind of touring, but it was at most one or two shows a month. He's like, we didn't have the capacity or the connectivity, the technology to do what you're doing. And that's when I realized this is holy shit. This is serious potential to actually use the technology that we have, to use music to set up events and concerts that are participatory around the world, not just the U.S., that build communities, nodes everywhere we go. And to sustain it, and then bring another artist through, and another artist through, and not just American artists. Now it's like, okay, so that's the vision. Now, since I've come back from this, obviously, just to fast forward, I made my next album after that and had already recorded a freedom anthem, an Egyptian freedom anthem, a year and a half before the April 6th movement was even founded. All because of the zeitgeist, being half Arab, being Iraqi, we were all part of that. Is zeitgeist. We were thinking the same thing at the same time, right? So here I'm dialed up with an album that has liner notes that say united for a global spring, or a song united for a global spring, before Occupy was even an idea, right? And that's all zeitgeist. We're all thinking the same thing. That's time's ready for it. But so it's just to fast forward, then the idea now, when I got this funding and I got to go to make this, since I've been back, and this is literally since the beginning of January, several NGOs over the course of the fall, but now getting in interfaith organizations have reached out to me saying, we want to book you at 15, 20 universities across the country. Will you do these many shows with us? We want to, And I was like, I got a plan. I've been working on this for a long time, and now we could do it. I could, we could put the video up. I already have Pete holding up a sign, Maori children holding up a sign. I've been talking to Steve Earle and Dave Matthews and all kinds of other people like that to see if they would help support the idea and the vision to get it more publicity. To go out, do the tour. Everywhere I go, we bring together as many social change organizations and student groups as possible. Maybe the concerts are in alternative venues. They don't have to be in rock clubs. They may be in cultural centers, religious venues or whatever. It doesn't make any difference.
University centers.
Universities like this. And then everywhere you've gone, you've brought this community together. Then I can go and say, Rami Assam is the most popular singer of the Egyptian Revolution, who's also given me a video for this campaign. And he's in that movie, The Square, that you should go see if you didn't see it. I can actually work to get a visa for Rami and help him tour the U.S. and help some young rap artist that's in New Orleans or something go and actually help build this global movement for civil rights, which is what we need. So it's very deliberate. It seems like it's time, and it seems like there's enough infrastructure to do something that crazy. I mean, that deliberate, and that it was deliberate when they built the Highlander Institute. It was deliberate when SALC and SN and SNCC did the type of work that they did. It wasn't an accident. They knew what they were doing. They made the decision that they're going to that their focus was going to be building a sustainable community that could sustain other communities to get that, and that's the vision. So here I'm in a place where it's already started. The beta video's been made. Now all the bogus images of me can get covered over with people all over the world who send in their images, and I could, hopefully we'll do as many concerts as possible and discussions like this, but and participatory events. So we build a community in 30, 50, 60 cities across the U.S.
My instinct is to invite them in and then maybe have, at the very end, have you invite the conversation with the audience.
Yeah, I thought you meant, there's people outside.
No. and then maybe have you sing at the very end. Does that sound okay?
Yeah, I mean, yeah. What?
So first of all, let's give a huge round of applause for Stephan Said.
Thanks.
That was just riveting stories. Thank you so much. And let me get up and hand the microphone to people and ask you to introduce yourselves, and after you say your piece and ask your questions, sign our consent forms at the very end. But who would like to join the conversation? Yeah.
Hi, Stephan. I'm a friend and an admirer. My name is David Orban, and we had some conversations about the fact that American culture, American commercialized culture, but also American folk culture travels the world. However, other cultures are also necessarily participating in the conversation, and we must cross the language barrier in order to make sure that the message is correctly understood and engaging through the music, but also through the words. So what would you like to say to that?
Well, I mean, you've been a big help in this. David works with .sub.com, it's been amazing. And I'm interested in speaking with you more about it. But in any case, already this video has through .sub.com, and there's a couple other sites that also do the same type of thing. But it's been translated and subtitled in a number of different languages, crowdsourced already. So there's translations in Portuguese, Urdu, done by people around the world. That's possible now. So, and you have to get the hookup. You have to have the platform that enables it. But actually, this is the beta video of what will be produced after we get the outreach, right? And even more people send in their things, and as we go around the world. But already, if you look on YouTube, you can click on these captions, and you'll pull it up, and there's like Arabic, Urdu, Portuguese, Spanish, right? Maori. Indigenous Maori language, right, translated. So that's just fascinating. I think it would be beautiful to see people singing it in their languages. I think it would be beautiful to see, and for me, even like if I'm on tour and going to places, I'm not talking to the microphone, but if I'm on tour, to learn it from all of that people in their own language, wherever you go, can you have them teach it to you, how to pronounce it, at least half decently, and to document all of that? That's a beautiful possibility right now that didn't used to exist. Question I have for you is if in the same way that you can caption, I wonder if you could have several different audios, or if it could be mixed. So like here's the track, but here you can hear it sung on the same video, so it's actually clocking all the hits on one, as opposed to, I had this problem when I released this freedom song, to help build the Egyptian revolution in the very beginning. I had to put up a separate YouTube video with these subtitles, or with me speaking in French, me speaking in Arabic, me speaking in English, telling the story of what it was for as a call to action, because the capacity wasn't there to have one video that you could flip a dial and get it in a different language, both audio and visual. That would be amazing, right? And most people aren't really thinking that, except for maybe Coca-Cola. It's only,
Go ahead.
How are you? We already know each other, of course, but I'm Colin Dean. I'm an alumni of the jazz program here and also the International Affairs program. I was wondering if you could elaborate on the ways in which your music or music in general affects social change. Because the way I see it is, how do we make sure that the people that need to hear it, for instance, policymakers, actually get the message? Are you reaching out to them directly so that they hear it, or is it a matter of broadening your audience so that it's a movement that starts from the grassroots? And in your performances, is it multi-layered, where you're having the concerts and performances, or are there also lectures, workshops on activism, and so on and so forth? Is it a matter of creating solidarity, so that your audience works to affect that change, or is it often the case that your audience members are already sympathetic to this message? Do you understand what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a few different good questions, and so where to begin? First, I'll do them backwards in a sense, because on the tour, the idea is that if there's a concert in the evening, but in the daytime, it's like a whole day or 2 days, let's say, if I'm someplace, that there will be, panel discussions or group, student-organized event, participatory events, or where I'm talking with them, and so it is about building community. It is about building solidarity, but I think that really something that I almost want to target in response to you, sort of your question, in doing that is to actually target the people that maybe you really most need to reach. I mean, one of the best interviews I ever had was when I was on tour in Alaska. And Alaska's like classic place is divided between like the most radical activists and the most conservative that there are. That's like what's there, because it's all military and oil or environmental like activists. That's just to give it but pretty good. And I was on like the ABC radio with the Rush Limbaugh of Alaska, and it was just amazing because like that Jeffersonian kind of talk. I just went into the egalitarian ethic of real America, and so that he had no choice but to agree with me, or else sound like he was un-American. And but that is the type of thing we should be aiming at, so that we can actually truly have that kind of impact. And that was definitely done in the civil rights movement. I mean, that was targeted, and that's why the language and all of it, that's when you get into the nonviolence in culture, not just nonviolence and not hitting back or doing it with a purpose, but also in the music that you make, the message that you make. That's all. There's got to be nonviolence. It's got to be through the whole spirit of it. Now, in terms of policy, I do think, and also thinking about movements, I do think that music affects change constantly. I mean, music is one of the main reasons it's, I think, the most powerful, or one of the most powerful mediums, is because music is a sound wave. It literally moves, and it goes through people. So physically in a room, when you're with people are feeling the same exact thing at the same time. And that is why people's heartbeats, it's proven, they start going to the same rate. There is a reason why a right song in an applied sense can empower people's dignity, empower people's, through their dignity, their ability to be nonviolent in the face of injustice and adversity. There's definitely that. Then on the grander macro scheme, sure, it can help to, what it does that we're not getting right now, because music is being, with a message is being censored out of our popular culture in an era where all other aspects of our popular culture, at least, we're seeing how many Oscar-nominated films right now? There's 5 or 6 of them are dealing. I just wrote an article that you could find online called "Why We Don't Care About the Grammys," and it was all about the fact that we're looking at an era in which there's 5 Oscar-nominated films, pop or documentaries, Wolf of Wall Street to The Square, are dealing with what we're dealing with in our reality. Music industry is like, it's TNA while the world's, and it's been like that for 15 years. And as a result, we are not benefiting from the feeling of zeitgeist. Music completed the circle. When you know that shit's hitting the fan, and you know that people are making an effort to change and they're winning, but you're hearing it on your radio, or you're hearing that song, it makes you think you can win. When you're not hearing it, it feels like something's missing. You don't know what it is. And that's what's happened. That's definitely happening. Then on the grander, not to go long, because you asked some good questions, I do think, though, in terms of affecting policy, sure, you can target songs, you can target things, use music and culture for specific tasks and hope to build campaigns. But longer term, I think we are much more, right now, if there is a comparison, we're much more in the 1950s right now with the global justice movement. We're not in the 60s yet. We've got lots of deliberate organizing to do to be able to develop hope in the type of mass nonviolence necessary for economic equality in the world, to be able to elevate that to a level at which the music, the speeches, the books, the films about it are at such a crescendo that people in offices are going to be like Johnson. Martin, please, go out there and bring enough people that I can sign this. You know what I mean? Yeah. But we're not in 1962 when a little kid from from Minnesota who's Jewish can change his name and sign a major record deal, singing songs that otherwise would never get on the radio. You know what I mean? We're like, we got a lot of work to do, and that's why I'm dead set on this, because I've been watching since Seattle. I've been watching us fail. We've had every one of Seattle, anti-war movement, Arab Spring, Occupy, were all steps to getting us there, but they all could have gone much further. They need, and next time we can't fail. We can't have another flash in the pan. So that's what I mean. I'm rambling, but that's what it's going to take to do policy to me, real term.
Stephan, in the middle of, after Seattle, before this moment, in the middle of it, you decided to get a master's in international affairs.
Yeah.
And I'm sort of interested in why that was, and in how you see universities, what role you see universities playing in cultural and political change.
Well, I'm not. First of all, I was. One, there's the blacklisting in this, but I think it was really even after Seattle. After Seattle in A16, which is April 16th, the next major demonstration in 2000, after Seattle. I just felt like I felt that our movement needed eloquent. I'm stumbling to say it, but I felt like people were not able to describe the connection between economic equality, social equality, with the global economic crisis, with war, with imperialism, in such a way that could be not just described, but actually convince or unite Arabs, Sunnis, Shias, Lutheran, Republican voting, homestead families in North Dakota, and anarchists. That's what I was looking for. I wanted, and I was like, this is simple. This is do unto others. There's no, you could write 1,000 books about the need, what's wrong with the world. There's nothing wrong with the world except one thing, and that's just that treating each other as not equally is no longer sustainable. And it's that simple. We know that we cannot possibly educate enough people on Earth, right, soon enough to get to fix the environmental crisis, to fix health crises, to stop war, to stop famine, to save resources. We can't educate them enough to get that to happen, to stop population. All these things are related to education. Well, back to universities. And that's only going to happen with a more equitable global society. And it's just, I just think it's that simple. And I think, so universities, that's why I went back to school. I went back to school because I thought, I'm not hearing voices that are saying what should be something that can speak to a West Virginia family as easily as my family in Baghdad. I'm hearing voices I was very fresh, I'll be honest with you. I stridently refused to go what would have been a much more commercial way if I had done like the Ani DeFranco route and kowtowed the line of the nation and everything. Love lots of stuff that they do, but finger pointing, right-wing politics and left-wing politics are hurting us. And now things have changed, and I'm not ragging on any of us because we're all learning. But in 2000, 2001, 2003, 2004, when your family's getting bombed, and you know the only way to stop it is to cross borders about equality, you start to get frustrated by people that are pointing fingers because they know that that's an easier way to sell more books. You know what I'm saying?
That actually seems like a wonderful place to stop. Do you want to do one for us?
I've already blasted everybody's ears out, and hopefully everybody's going to come and we're going to have some snacks and talk.
No, we want to hear you sing. First of all, let's thank you again.
Thank you.
Wonderful, and I want to thank everyone for coming, and it will be a joy to finish by listening to Stephan, and then please do join us across 13th Street for a reception.
I'm not accustomed to talking like that. I guess it's weird. If you feel like you've hogged the mic more than when you're on stage singing songs, and it's probably true, but the way I was going on. But.
No, it's fabulous.
Anyway, now I'm like going into my different mode. I'm really happy to have been here. This has just been an amazing time. I just think that we're all at an amazing place in the world right now. I really do. I think that I could say it in a million ways. It's like seeing Jahan Najam's new movie, like The Square coming out, seeing conversations happening between people around the world about what we're talking about. They're happening right now. And the idea of being able to even go and do this and being offered to come to universities, that's a matter of what's happening in the time right now, our times right now. And so I'm just really hopeful, and I just think, in the same way that you know, being able to come here and speak about this at this time is just, it all fit together. It was an accident. It wasn't like it was meant. It was one of those accidents. Like, so yeah, amen. Amen. Hallelujah. So. Hope it sounds good. There's no tubes on this, and there's no reverb. Are you
going, said the man at his desk. I'm going to a new world, said the child. And he stood, and he stood, and he stood, and 'twere well that he stood. I'm going to a new world, said the child. And he stood. Well, I'm sounding drums of war, said the man at his desk. Well, I will not fight your war, said the child. And he stood, and he stood, and he stood, and 'twere well that he stood. I will not fight your war, said the child, and he stood. Well, but don't you love your country, said the man at his desk. Yeah, I do, but you don't, said the child. And he stood, and he stood, and he stood, and 'twere well that he stood. I do, but you don't, said the child. And he stood. Well, but don't you know the truth, said the man at his desk. Yeah, you lie and call it truth, said the child. And he stood, and he stood, and he stood, and 'twere well that he stood. You lie and call it truth, said the child. And he stood. Well, then you must be scared to die, said the man at his desk. Not prepared, and you're scared, said the child. And he stood, and he stood, and he stood, and 'twere well that he stood. I'm prepared, and you're scared, said the child. And he stood. Well, I think I hear a bell, said the man at his desk. Yeah, it's ringing you to hell, said the child. And he stood, and he stood, and he stood, and 'twere well that he stood. It's ringing you to hell, said the child. And he stood.
There you go. All right. So,
One more?
I don't know what I'll sing.
But
My mind is like running with all these dialogues of my own life that I haven't thought about. You know, it's like all these memories, these paths. Wish I had a big horn section and frickin', you know, DJ with beats and no. So I'll just sing "Take a Stand." This is was the single, first single really, I guess, if you would call it that, on my last record. And the gentleman that really mixed it and helped finish the thing off is sitting here. Mark, thank you. Mark Patti here, who's an amazing musician and producer, but he, I recorded the song here on the Love Make the World Go Round on that video was basically recorded in one day and a half. Something like, I guess it was mixed by the end, almost by the end of the second day with pretty amazing. One of those things. Sometimes it just falls out of your lap and it breaks on the ground. Well, I just want to say one thing. I'm never supposed to interrupt. The funniest thing is I open up this guitar case, and this is actually Pete Seeger's capo. Because the last show I did with him was at the Cooper Union's Great Hall. What an amazing place to do a show with Pete. And you mind if I tell this? Because this is an amazing story. Because when the Bell came out, Pete was on it, of course. And right after I'd finished mixing it, the night that I finished mixing it, and I'd made up the first 100 self-burned CDs, Pete, I was asked to come and sing or something with Pete and Howard Zinn, and I can't remember what else, at Cooper Union's Great Hall. And I was like, okay. I came over and I had this handful, 10 of them, and I was like, Pete, sign these. We should sign these. So I'm sitting there in the back with and what's his name? You're going to forget, you guys would kill me. Earl or Adner, what's his name? The movie star, what's his, Adner? Come on, you guys are going to know. Older gentleman I knew from Ed Asner. Ed Asner is there with Howard Zinn sitting at the table when I walk, and I'm like, sign these, please. And Pete's like writing his name on all of them. But then the next, so it was just amazing because then being there with him this past year over this song and singing there with him and was just like a whole completion. And now he's left us at the same time that he'd just taken a photograph for this campaign. But he had, he forgot to pick up his capo and put it on his guitar. So like at one song, so I picked it up, and I put it on his guitar for him to get him in the right key. He came home later and ended up having, I'm like, that's not my capo, because I picked his up as a result. But anyway, so I'm just noticed it tonight when I was on my way here. So I'm saying that to have a moment of love and respect and yeah.
Here comes the cacophony, polyphony, a great big symphony. Bright light shining through the night of misery. Song ringing around the world about unity and hip-hop, folk, rap, rock, punk, country. Little ditty you can sing along. The words so easy it won't take you long. No matter how you sing you can't go wrong, 'cause the melody's easy and the backbeat is strong. It's okay, it's okay. We gon' make it to the day together. Take a stand, take a stand, take a stand in every land, 'cause we all want the same thing, just to be free. So take my hand and take a stand, yeah, take a stand. This one's going out to my brothers in the hood, 'cause I always knew you would. And this one's going out to my family in Iraq, holding out while the big bombs drop. Going out to my blood in Israel, we'll never get to heaven through the gates of hell. Africa, America, Europe, Asia, Australia, let the spirits are flowing in the air. But it's alright, it's alright. We gon' make it through the night together. Take a stand, take a stand, take a stand in every land, 'cause we all want the same thing, just to be free. Take my hand, take a stand, yeah, take a stand. When I got up this morning, I was feeling so free that all I want to do is go and sing about how we could all live happily. Will someone please tell me what's got into me? It's a cacophony, polyphony, a great big symphony. Bright light shining through the night of misery. Song ringing around the world about unity and hip-hop, folk, rap, rock,